All right, part three of concept three, which is specific physiological factors affecting performance. We're looking today at nutrition and performance. So we can see our key ideas under there: understanding the impact on performance of nutritional strategies, healthy eating for performance, pre-event, during event, recovery, role and strategies, and the impact of hydration. So all important things. Okay, so what factors need to be considered in relation to performance and nutrition? So there's three key factors that need to be considered when looking at sport and nutrition. So one, we need to look at the intensity of the activity the athlete will undertake, just like with anything that we've covered: the intensity, the duration, and the consistency of effort. So that shouldn't be something different. And when we're looking at questions, those are the first three things that should always come to mind, and we should be able to link them to plenty of things too. So things that we'll be looking at, things like carbo loading before the event. So things like simple carbohydrates and high GI foods during the event. How hydration and affects the body temperature and blood flow, and protein for the muscle repair. Question: should dietary intake be the same throughout the activity? So sport and nutritional preparation needs to take place on three different levels. So pre-event, so the food that is consumed before the event, days before, hours before, and minutes before. Food that's consumed during the event, so in the event and in that activity time, and then post-event as part of the recovery process. And we'll go through the specifics of that a bit later on. So what needs to be considered when planning this nutritional intake before the activity? The energy needed during the activity influences the nutritional planning. So again, what's the intensity, what's the duration, and things like that. So if it's 1.5 hours of walking, 10 minutes per kilometre requires about 600 and 1200 calories per hour in energy. Whether running requires a different rate, and the cycling requires that different rate. So obviously we'd need to have an intake of kilojoules or / calories before that event, which would relate to the walking, the running, the cycling, for example. So we were suggesting a reason that less energy being needed for cycling than need for running. Answer being the cycling requires the use of less muscle groups, because cycling is a sitting activity, not using that upper body muscle, so the intensity will therefore be less. Alright, what's the effects of what an athlete eats before an event? So we look at gastric emptying or digestion plays a major role in food intake before an event. So if we look at liquids, empty from the stomach at a rate of 1 litre per hour, so they're the fastest. Carbohydrates take 2 hours to empty from the stomach. Protein takes 3 hours to empty from the stomach, and fat is the longest. It takes 4 to 6 hours. So that's why you might have a liquid carbohydrate would be best during that activity, because it can be immediately digested and broken down, where something like a fat you wouldn't take directly before an event or during, because it's not going to be able to be broken down properly. Fat can be used as something you eat in the morning, or protein and fat can be used after the event. So, imagine a netball player has to play a match at 2 p.m. The player decides to eat a pie with sauce and a bucket of chips at 12:30. Explain the effect of this food intake and performance capability of the player in the game. So again, that's a high fat meal, and she's taken that 1.5 hours before the game. So the effect of this food intake and performance capability of the game. So the dietary intake is high in fat, as we mentioned, takes 4 to 6 hours to empty from the stomach. So the food intake was only 1.5 hours before the game. This means that most blood would be diverted to the digestive system instead of the muscles in the player, which would have a negative impact on performance. So that redistribution of blood flow is really interesting. So one, we know from the theory that it takes 4 to 6 hours. Food intake was only 1.5 hours before the game. Then we can say, or the extra bit of knowledge is that the redistribution of blood flow goes from the working muscles to the digestive system, which then we know would reduce aerobic respiration within those muscles. Therefore, would have to be using more anaerobic energy, would bring on more fatigue. So you can see how nutrition can have that huge impact on performance in that scenario there. Explaining a change that could be made to this intake time and that would be better suited to optimising the performance at game time. So if we're still going to eat this higher fat meal, what we probably want to do is move it 4 to 6 hours before the event. So instead of having it at 12:30, maybe having it at 8:30, and therefore would have the carbohydrate element digested at that point to be then able to use in the game. So let's have a look at the answer. Either ensure the current food selection was eaten 4 to 6 hours before the event, allowing adequate digestion time, therefore blood would be available to the muscles and fuels would be stored, or eat carbohydrates which provide energy and digest faster if the timing of intake is correct. Alright, what should an athlete eat before a sporting event? What food should be eaten? Basically, food eaten before an event should be 58% carbohydrate, 15% protein, 25% fat, a good hydration regime, a good balance of vitamins, minerals associated with balanced diet, and energy intake of about 4,500, 5,500 units per day. So that's what it should look like. But I mean, you can see the majority. You probably want carbohydrates before an event. That's going to be the predominant one. So what is carbohydrate loading? Carbohydrate loading is a popular pre-event nutritional strategy. So you'll often get asked about strategies. So strategy would be carbohydrate loading. So that would be your knowledge and term, and then you would need to understand how that would then affect performance. So high carbohydrate intake, 36 to 48 hours is enough time for super compensation to occur. 7 to 12 grams of carb per kilo of body weight is a good intake. For example, 65 kilo athlete, 455 to 750 grams is a good strategy. Along with a training taper, so a lower demands of the training program, the event a couple before the days, and then this will allow for an increased work capacity. So the muscles have more carbohydrate during the event, and they'll be rested from the training taper. When we're looking at high carbohydrate intake as well, we want to look at things like your breads, rice, cereals, pasta. You don't want high, lots of sort of fatty carbohydrates like your chips and your pies and things like that before. You want to look at your clean carbohydrates. So, what should an athlete eat before the event? What timing of what should be eaten depending on what type of food eaten, and the activity of the event also affect what could be eaten. So it's a good guide. So eat low GI foods, which we'll go through before. Foods low in fat, moderate low in protein, and avoid eating excess fibre and salt, and drink adequate fluids. Make sure these foods are eaten hours before an event because time taken to digest. Alright, so high GI versus low GI. So low GI raise blood sugar slowly. So these are absorbed into the bloodstream slowly. They're more commonly used hours before and after event, and sometimes high in fibre. Where high GI food, they raise blood sugar quickly, so they absorbed into bloodstream quickly. They are commonly used an hour before the event because they are digested quickly, and common used during the event and immediately after the event. So things like lollies, really sugary drinks, flavoured milks, things like that are going to get that blood sugar up quickly. Where low GI foods are like your pastas, your breads, your cereals, things that are going to help recover. Alright, so timing before an event, here's an outline, shows some good sources of food. So before event, things like banana, sports drinks, energy bars, crackers, saladas and things like that. 2 to 3 hours before an event, sandwich. You could look at sugary things like pancakes with syrup and berries, sports drink, smoothie. and 3 to 4 hours before an event, scrambled eggs, toast, banana, plain pasta, plain rolls, bread rolls, things like that. So there's again a good example of things that you could use before an event, which you could use with your revision. All right, so protein intake before an event. So you're looking at repairing body tissue, which is what protein's job is, to repair that body tissue. So general training, 1 gram per kilo of body mass. Strength athletes, if you want to improve that body mass, there's their sources. Endurance athletes and adolescents. What about we got here sports drinks, what type of amount as well. So we've got that there. So what are the important reasons for eating after an event? So things like you could have considered to refuel, restore. So the muscle and the liver glycogen used during the event. So we need to replenish that glycogen use. And we need to repair the muscle tissue and rehydrate. So we need to replace the fluid lost during that activity and to cool the body down. And we need to make sure that we can repair that muscle tissue. All right, so timing of the eating is particularly important out of the event. So 2 hours immediately after is the best for recovery. So foods are offering 50 grams of carbohydrate for recovery. So sports drinks, soft drink, orange juice, jelly beans, sports gels, fruits, yogurts, even low-fat milk, which offer protein as well, baked beans and toast. So just a case study here. An elite endurance athlete was required to complete a 2-hour block of training over 3 days, followed by an overnight rest period. The dotted line in the graph indicates the decrement of performance over the 3 days. The graph also shows the level of glycogen found in the leg muscles before and after training. So you can see here the glycogen levels go up, and that's at our initial starting point, and after the first training, then we can see they have undertaken nutrition to get it back up, but it's not at the same level. That was at pre-event level, and then here, so you can see it's declined significantly. So describe the effect of training on leg glycogen levels. So we can see, and by using data, initially we're looking at 120 over here before the event, and then you're losing sort of 35 to 37 for the next day, and then we go down to nearly around 40 for that last day. So each training session causes a decrease in muscle glycogen. Explain a reason for the continual low levels of glycogen in the athlete's legs before each training session. So we obviously haven't replenished the glycogen depleted during the training adequately. For example, the 120 mole pre-training session 1 to 85 mole at the beginning of the training session 2 indicates they did not replenish the glycogen depleted. Explain the effect of this continual decrease in glycogen levels on the athlete's ability to maintain a high level of effort as the training intensity progresses. So you've got to look at what carbohydrates being used for higher levels of intensity. So the glycogen is the dominant nutrient used by the body during activity. Storage is limited to the body for 2 hours. Each training session goes for 2 hours, and therefore this depletes this amount. Now the last bit here is talking about hydration. Now I've only got about 30 more seconds left in the video, so what you're going to have to do is pause and read the hydration bits here, and then you'll get the questions. So I'm going to log off here. Please make sure that you pause, read the different bits of hydration and the questions. So a good strategy for hydration here, before, during and after the event. The importance and your essentials guide questions. Please make sure that these are ready for the end of the week when we're going to review. Good luck.